Well, Jim, let's go from wigs and everything going on over there to Campbell by the Sea. And if that seems like a bad transition, it is, because I didn't have a better one at hand.
Can we go back to the pink dress and the white carnation?
Well, let's talk about this. There is something that a ton of listeners have sent us. They put it on the Cult of Cornette Facebook page, on Twitter, via email. It is an interview that Dave Meltzer did with Chris Van Vliet. Let me say that. Let me say it again. Chris Van Vliet, because I don't think I've ever said his name correctly because I didn't know how to say it.
It is confusingly spelled. Vliet. I guess that would be Vliet or Vliet. Vliet.
And he's on YouTube. You can check out his content. This is one of his videos. It's an interview with Dave Meltzer. And again, a lot of the listeners have been sending it in for various reasons. The one thing that a lot of people have been honing in on are Dave's, I guess, responses to Chris's questions about the star ratings. And the more it goes, his explanations as to what causes a star rating, who is he to give a star rating, like just various things about this star rating that you, in fact, created with Norm Dooley.
Well, this is not a confrontational interview. Mr. Van Vliet is very respectful, but when he starts asking these questions, you can tell that even he knows that he's not necessarily getting anything that makes any fucking sense. And by the way, just a factoid that was brought up to me here recently. Do you know that Jon Moxley has had more 5-star matches in the last year than the entire WWF/WWE as a promotion from 1997 till 2011?
Well, that's only because people love those matches more now than any of the other matches were loved in the moment previously.
Or something like that. That must be it.
Or something like that.
That must be it.
Well, let's go to this. Again, check it out. It's on YouTube. Chris Van Vliet has a channel. I believe it's just his name. And I couldn't pronounce it. You probably can't spell it. I think it's Vliet.
I just spelled it.
Well, here it is. Dave Meltzer talking about 5-star matches. We'll break this up several times and talk about various things.
I want to talk about your rating system, because obviously ratings in wrestling are subjective, but what goes into it for you? What goes into rating a match for you?
I just watch the match, and when it's over, it's kind of like, what did they accomplish? Did it look good? Did the crowd get off on it? Sometimes the crowd will get off on it because the two personalities are so strong.
Sure.
And I don't necessarily think, I'll just give you examples is, Nick Bockwinkel, who was a brilliant guy. And he would always say, like, if you start the match and the crowd's going crazy for the ring entrance, and that's the hottest part of the match, then how great was the match really? Even if the match is much hotter than a match that starts at 0 and you build it up to a level in the entire match, build, which to him and to me as well is like the most successful matches. You start at this point, you build, and you peak at the finish. That's, which means having a good finish. It doesn't, but sometimes that, it involves like, a lot of people think the most brilliant finish is, all the referee bumps and the run-ins and all that. And if it works for the crowd, then that's fine. But a lot of people also hate those finishes because they want the clean finish. So they get mad. And it's like, sometimes if it doesn't work and people boo at the end or groan, I think groan is worse than booing, but, just go.
Let me stop this for a second, Jim. Any thoughts early on his?
I thought a sentence was going to be finished before I called a halt to it.
I didn't know what it was going to finish. I wanted to let you jump in.
Boy, I tell you what, he doesn't spend a lot of money on periods, does Dave? But
what he's saying, the actual substance of what he's saying.
What he had already tried to say was, okay, did they accomplish something? Did it look good? Did they build to a big finish? What are we talking about every week with the matches that he mostly praises? What did this accomplish? Nothing. It didn't look good. It looked like a bunch of fucking people either falling all over the top of each other, cooperating with each other, or cutting their heads with visible blades on camera. And what do we say? My God, they just did everything they knew how to do until finally they finished with a small package or a goddamn tap out, immobile in the middle of the ring because they've run out of shit to do. They didn't build to anything. So he's contradicting what he raves about.
Well, let's go back to this. Chris Van Vliet with Dave Meltzer.
Or, bullshit or, whatever, then to me, the finish didn't work. But, it's like, it's certainly, it's about crowd reactions, but it's not like, it's not necessarily decibel levels, although that's a big part of it for sure. If you do a lot of unique, cool things and, just do things out of the pattern, do things that kind of like shock you. I think the one thing with it's like, if you're expecting something and then they do something different and go, oh my God, if they can do that real well, like surprise the audience in a good way where they react. I like that. I like that.
Let's stop this for a second. Because again,
like that.
The question was what goes into your rating a 5-star match, or what goes into your rating matches, I guess, not even necessarily just a 5-star match. These are some of the qualities he looks for. I apologize for Julio and the gang and the blowers in the background if you could hear any of that. Sorry, Jace, I guess I should say. But what are your thoughts on his thoughts so far?
I don't know, because I'm not sure what his fucking thoughts are. Well, if you do something different, that's always good, except he didn't tell us what different is. Possibly different would be not fighting on the floor all the time, not using furniture, not doing repetitive cooperative gymnastic flips, because those are in almost every match, but those are in all the matches that he praises. So again, I'm lost.
Is surprise a necessary component of a excellent match?
No, it doesn't. He doesn't even articulate what the shocking surprise is. So you mean, well, I expected when he jumped up and leaped up in the air in front of his opponent, he was going to drop kick him, but instead he jumped up and farted in his face. Well, that would be surprising, but I don't know if it would be preferable. I don't know what he's fucking talking about. You don't need to surprise people or shock people with a great match. You just need to have one. Yes, it's easier if you're already over and the issue's already over and you can start out with people with it. But I don't know that every once in a while I was surprised by how good a match was, but it wasn't that I was surprised about something that happened in the match. That's what made it great. That's more of an angle type of thing, a shocking reveal or a debut or something. But I remember one of the greatest matches I ever saw live was one that I was not really particularly looking forward to, was Jerry Lawler and Ken Lucas. When Ken Lucas had not been in the Tennessee territory since before I started watching wrestling on television. Suddenly, 1979, the match is advertised on TV on Saturday for Tuesday night. And Lawler does an interview with his face beat up saying, well, Ken Lucas got me in Birmingham or wherever, but I'm going to get him this week. And Lucas had not even been on television. It was a surprise deal in that respect that it was booked. And they went out and had a double juice match that tore the house down, that had people jumping in a fucking ring, throwing shit. It was goddamn incredible. But it was a great match. So anyway.
Well, maybe we'll get some more clarity from some more audio from Dave. I have to say, Chris Van Vliet is in a very nice room. It's well lit. He's using a nice camera. There's a YouTube plaque in the back. Dave is holding onto his microphone like if he lets go, he's going to get sucked into the abyss.
And he looks like he has a strong smell of vinegar.
Well, no one else is going to get why that's funny, but let's go back to more audio here.
Rather than just pattern. But pattern, when it works, simple pattern, is not wrong either. And, it's like, at the end of the day, it's just kind of like what's working and what's getting the crowd going. Just execution of some of it. It's a complicated thing, but in other ways, it's not complicated. You just kind of watch it, and like when it's over and where the audience is at that moment and how it's built and everything like that, it's like, oh, whatever. And I mean, I know, like,
so let's stop it. So is that an explanation? It's where the audience is at the end of the match?
I don't know what the fuck he's talking about. Again, it's a simple thing like TV Guide and the Leonard Maltin Movie Guide. Movies get 1, 2, 3, or 4 stars and duds. And 1 is that was the shits. Well, dud is that was one of the worst things we've ever seen. 1 is that was the shits. 2 is that was pretty average. 3 is that was really good. And 4 is, wow, they tore the house down. There it is. if there's shitty looking fake work, if the match doesn't make any sense, if there's obvious cooperation, if there's nonsensical garbage that doesn't need to be, if a guy is out on the floor climbing a ladder to try to dive off onto some piece of furniture on somebody when the object is to get in the ring and win the match, then that takes away because that's fucking stupid. It's not hard to figure out. Just have a functioning brain and figure out, are these guys having a believable conflict, and how exciting was it? There you go.
But again, with that argument, how does that justify good star ratings for matches where the match was fine, but the room was dead? Well, let's get more audio here.
Like tons of people, and we're all, we're all kind of close, but one of the things, it's like, I think people, to me, like, I'll just give you an example. It's like, if I'm sitting at a show and my best friend is sitting with me, and he'll go like, "What'd you give the match?" And I'll go 4. He goes, "I thought it was 4.5." The general thing is okay, we agreed. It was a great match.
Yeah.
It was a great match. You're never going to be like my thing, it's like, you're not supposed to agree with 4.25, but if you think it's a 2, then we disagreed. And there's nothing wrong with that either. It's just, what we did was disagree. But sometimes people go like, "Oh, why'd you give this 4.75 and not 5?" And it's like, well, if I gave it 4.75 and gave it 5, and it's fine, it means we agreed. 100% we agreed. That's a 1/4 of a star. Of course, that's, it's like a movie.
Let me stop there for a second. We 100% agree if we're both giving something a different rating?
Yes, but all of my friends get better ratings than the people that I don't like. But that don't read anything into that. And again, he's not explaining anything. And yes, of course, you're going to enjoy a match, to your statement earlier, with a crowd. When the crowd is dead, like in the early days of getting Japanese tapes, before the people really got into, they were always crazy over the funks and Brody, but before they got into making noise in every match, right? You remember those days, they'd go to the smaller towns to do a TV taping outside of the big markets in Japan, and the crowd would sit there and politely applaud, right? They wouldn't scream and yell. Yeah. And you would see, I remember a Von Erichs match, tag team match, Kevin and David. That's how early it was. That was so quiet in the arena, you could hear them calling spots to each other in English because they thought that nobody spoke English in Japan. They were like, "I'll drop kick, you drop down, you drop down." And you hear it plain as day. But at the same time, yes, a dead crowd does hinder a match, but still the performance you can rate. Does that mean that a movie, is Citizen Kane worse when you watch it in a theater because you're the only one in the theater? And yes, viscerally, when you're that's why wrestling in the territories was so much more exciting, because when you are in an arena full of people, whether it be 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, however many, that's all going batshit over something, it's catching. It's contagious. You get swept up in it, and you then enjoy the experience more because it's a fucking thing going on. If you're sitting there in the building watching the same exact match by yourself, it's going to be the same match. It was done as well. It was performed as well, but because part of that live experience is the fans being involved, you're naturally predisposed to like something more if there's a bunch of people involved in it there in the building. That's why it always looks good on television when people are going ape shit. And wrestling got much, much stronger reactions in the territory days, as we all know. That's without dispute.
Well, let's go back to this, which is also without a dispute, at least so far. We'll see how it turns out here, but let's go back to Dave talking about how he rates a match, why he rates a match, what goes into the ratings of these matches with Chris Van Vliet.
Movie critic, where it's just the same thing. If you're within a half star, you agreed. If you're within a star, you're pretty much agreeing. If you're 2 stars apart, you're disagreeing. And
yeah, the difference with the movie critics, though, is you go on Rotten Tomatoes and there's 93 ratings for a movie. When you're talking about pro wrestling matches, it really comes down to there's some people rating them, but your rating matters a lot.
Yeah, well, I try to do a fair job. You know, I mean, I think that it's not like, again, like what I do. To me, ratings, it's a recommend. You know, in the end, it's a recommendation. This is how bad you should go out of your way to see the match if you didn't see the match. That's how I'm mentally looking at it. But I also think that it's not.
Let me stop it right there, because I actually think that is probably the best way to look at it. It is a personal recommendation.
Yeah.
Of the match.
And he's recommending that you watch his friends' matches more than you watch the really great talent in the industry. Hence, that's why Twinkle Toes McFingerbang has multiple matches rated higher than Ric Flair, than Shawn Michaels, than Kurt Angle, than Ricky Steamboat, than it said name the great. Anybody, ever. Because he didn't like those guys personally as much as he does Kenny. I guess, because what's the fuck? How else do you explain it? I want all of you to watch my friends' matches, so I'm going to rate them higher than every great wrestling superstar of the past 40 years.
If it's a recommendation of what matches to watch, and traditionally 5 stars has always been accepted as the cap, even though obviously there were a few outliers going back to your days with Norm Dooley rating matches, but 5 stars considered the cap. If that's your recommendation, and all of a sudden you start saying, this is 6.5 stars, what are you saying to the audience? What are you telling people? And, well, go ahead.
I don't know what Dave's telling people. When we did that, we're telling people, hey, first of all, you can't take this fucking rating system seriously because it's just us two assing off watching these matches and imitating the TV guide. But secondly, the 6 stars was meant to say, well, this was ridiculously over and above anything that you will ever see happen anywhere. And the goddamn building almost caught on fire. And you can't just do that all the time, nor is it, again, this whole thing is not legitimate to begin with. It's a ripoff of the movie guide. But if you're going to do this, be consistent. And again, he's been doing it for 40 years. And suddenly, all this hokey horse shit that his personally anointed friends and superstars of wrestling are doing is miles better than everything that every great star of the past 40 years has done. And that indicates to me some home cooking.
Yeah, if Dave's standing next to a friend and they're rating the match 4 stars and 4.5 stars, and they're pretty much in agreement, and that's fine. If the friend is consistently rating the match 2 stars, is Dave going to go start sitting with a different group of friends? Or is he going to stay? He
don't have that many to choose from these days. Talk about me fucking burning bridges. Most of the people who have known Dave for multiple decades either shake their heads, roll their eyes, or avoid the phone.
Well, he did not avoid this interview with Chris Van Vliet, so let's go back to this questioning about the rating of the matches, or the ratings of the matches. Let's do this.
Not nearly as important as so many other things that I do. I think the business analysis is by far the most important thing. And people will get all hung up on the ratings aspect. Yeah. It's just like, you're not even reading the issue with the key stuff in mind. You're ignoring the stuff. Or people who don't read and then get mad at the ratings. It's like, read, and learn. There's so much to learn. Yeah. And you're just getting hung up on 1/4 star in the ratings. And it's just like, that's kind of like a waste of time.
Well, people get hung up on the ratings when you look at specific things. Like, I was blown away to learn you've only given 1 5-star rating to a TNA match. And I was like, come on. Have you? I mean, I was blown away to learn Kurt Angle's never had a 5-star match.
Yeah, like, Kurt Angle. He's had tons of 4 3/4, which is basically the same thing. It's just like it's
not the same thing.
Yeah. I think anything over, to me, mentally, anything over 4 is great. And so if you say I've never given Kurt Angle a 4-star match, whatever.
No, you've given him plenty of 4-star matches.
But I mean, 5, it's like, yeah, could you say that the Chris Benoit match at Royal Rumble was a 5-star match? I was pretty damn close. But I said
Kurt Angle versus Samoa Joe in TNA? Hell yeah.
You think so? I never. I thought there were great Kurt Angle Samoa Joe matches in TNA. I never saw one as a 5-star match. And I mean, it's like, whatever. I mean, 5 stars to me is like, that's like freaking, elite level, like, it's
it's the elite level.
5 stars is elite.
It's the elite rating. And so again, from his own chicken lips, Kurt Angle never got 5 stars. Twinkle Toes has had 7.
Well, because Kurt Angle wasn't elite. But let's go back to this.
I don't know that, again, you're arguing a quarter of a star or whatever, but it's like, I never thought about it.
I will say, whether
I
probably quarter or 4.5, that 5 star is a benchmark. That's a big benchmark for people.
Yeah. Well, it shouldn't be, because if you're at 4 3/4, that means I'm thinking that you should be considered for match of the year. So, but
why not give it the 5 star? Why not give Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania 25 5 stars?
There was, at that time, when I watched, there's a couple of things. Number one, when I watched it, I thought this is pretty damn close. And whenever I say pretty damn close,
when I watched it, I thought, I have a cold. I'm not in a good mood today.
Hold on. The explanation, though, the idea that it's the personal recommendation, but you're not supposed to, the fact that it's a benchmark for wrestlers, which is a truth, which is an absolute truth. Dave says it shouldn't be. He shrugs. He doesn't really want to accept even, I guess, the responsibility of that, it sounds like.
No, but also, again, if you're going to do this shit, be consistent. And he hems and haws, Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. It was close, but golly, Twinkle Toes and Ishii was 2.5 stars better than that. Or whatever it's ridiculous. And you can't just keep on making up new numbers. They still only rate movies from 1 to 4. We got 1 to 5. Stick with it. It's ludicrous.
Let's go back to the ludicrous argument. No, let's go back to this discussion. Chris Van Vliet with Dave Meltzer.
Be like 100%. Okay, so, and 2 of the greatest wrestlers, literally after that match were just, and this isn't, I'd already rated the match. But I just remembered, these are 2 of the all-time greats.
Sure.
Called me up and go, what did you think? And I go, I thought the match was freaking awesome. That match was fantastic. And it's like, basically one was, if I tried to do a match like that, if I did a match like that, I'd have to fight my way out of the dressing room because so many guys would have heat for me for killing everyone's finisher. And, and you could say that about a lot of other matches too, but.
Including everyone that Twinkle Toes has ever had, and the Buckaroos as well.
It's nonstop kicking at it. It's not even just them. It's all up and down the card now. Everyone's kicking at it. Everyone's finish.
Yeah, but Michaels and Undertaker shouldn't have killed those finishes.
But it was a perspective. And then, another one was just, and I think subconsciously I thought the same thing. When I watched Shawn and Undertaker, the first one, which was great, and I almost did give it 5 stars. And some people think it's because of the dive, spot that went wrong. It's like, nah, it really wasn't. It was, I'm going to say there was a predictableness to it that I could feel. Like I knew what they were doing. And sometimes that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it was so long and I always knew what they were going to do.
So long.
Well, let me just say, I do think, for my personal way of seeing matches, I don't give them ratings, but I'll say what I like and I don't like. There is something to that. If I watch a match, I've said it to you before, if I feel like I know what they're doing before they're going to do it, I'm assuming that's kind of what he means. It's hard to kind of get into it the way other people may. I assume that's what he means there.
Well, but when he's talking about the length of, again, we just got rid of Forbidden Door. One was 40 minutes, one was 30 minutes. And it wasn't Michaels and Undertaker in them either.
Let's go back to this. Chris Van Vliet and Dave Meltzer.
And it was thrilling as hell. But it was not, it didn't give me that, oh my God, this was brilliant. It was like, okay, this is what they were doing. My turn, your turn. And it worked. It was like, again, like, look, it won match of the year. I easily could have given it 5 stars. But whatever it was, when it was over, it was like I was debating. And I've done that at many matches. Where it's kind of like, like, is this 4 3/4 or 5? Well, that means it's 4 3/4 when I say that. If I say 5, no debate, then it's 5. And,
Is it just that you
No debate.
No debate about
5.
this. Laying the law down.
That should be his new catchphrase. That's fucking great. No debate. 5 stars.
Do you not like the style of WWE matches versus New Japan or versus AEW?
Well, I think, there's certain dynamic aspects of it in the sense of with New Japan, the wrestlers are technically so much better, and they're also better at building the perfect time for the finishes.
Well, they wrestle a very different style,
and
right?
they do a lot of cross ups where you think you know where they're going, and then they're not. They take you and they twist you. And with WWE, it is different in the sense that it's built upon repetitiveness, and teaching the audience to pop for certain moves and then doing them. And there's some cross up, but it's really about repetitiveness and teaching people to pop for a certain thing. And then you do it over and over and over again, so they learn this is where we pop. And in Japan, it certainly exists, but there is a lot more thought to going that one step deeper of this is where we're going, and they're about to pop for this, so we're going to do this. And then they're going to pop even bigger. And so that's kind of, I think that's, that and the better, they train in basics a lot better. So their stuff looks better. So there's always that aspect too. And they hit much harder. And I think that adds to the realism aspect. It's just, it's harder hitting. It's better technical. I mean, I'm talking at the top level. I'm not saying that there aren't guys in.
Let me stop this for a moment.
Please do.
He was asked why. I forget exactly what it was, whether he rates New Japan and WWE differently, or does he like one versus the other?
Did he not like the WWF style versus the other guy?
And he's been building up New Japan ever since.
Yeah.
They're stronger, they hit harder, they're better, they twist you, they turn you.
They twist you, they turn you, that was the theme song from Attack of the Killer Tomato. Yes. I think that I will miss her. A tomato ate my sister. They'll twist you and slice you and dice you and gobble you up for dinner or lunch.
We were so far through the see, without any singing.
I didn't want to leave him. I didn't want to leave him hanging on show 300.
And no one would have picked that song. But let's go to this. Or back to this. Chris Van Vliet and Dave Meltzer.
Company who do that or can do that, but it's definitely more of a thing. And, so that's probably where, the New Japan matches will, but again, like people who watch everything, the New Japan matches usually end up getting, and in any of these, not just me, but everyone, you could look at Cage Match or, Grapple when it existed or, it was consistent. I would look at some of those and go like, man, unless it's like a historical WWE match at a WrestleMania, which I actually think that a lot of the Mania matches, because they're at Mania, kind of get overrated. But that's a good thing. It's actually a good thing that you don't have to do as much, but you're at Mania, so it makes it a little bit more special. That
let me stop it again. He's justifying what he thinks because like-minded people in small sections of wrestling websites on the internet agree with him.
Agree with him. Yes.
Aside from those, it's very difficult to see a WWE match near the top of those lists at the end of the year. But I mean, again, like
it's fascinating to hear all this because
it's yet like an example is like for years, not now because things changed, but for years, if you look at my ratings for shows, my NXT ratings were higher than, it's funny when the NXT AEW thing was going on. So my NXT shows during the TakeOver era were always the highest because they consistently put on great matches, and that's WWE product, so it's not.
But WWE as a whole, not NXT, only has 9 5-star matches in the entire history of WWE/WWF.
Yeah.
And there was a stretch from 97 to 2011 when there were no 5-star matches in WWE. I mean, I don't know, that just doesn't seem to add up to me.
That's an interesting thing. It was very, very hard to get a 5-star match. And I mean, it still is. It's super hard. The only difference is that guys are so much better now. Like if I look back at my, at a match that I would have given 5 stars, and I look back 30 years, I look at it, and there are exceptions. And they're usually, you know, like, in Japan, believe it or not, but even in Japan, I mean, I've seen like, you know, matches that I'd given 5 stars that I would look and go like, it's a 4.25, 4.5 star match today. You know, it's like,
do you do the reverse? Do you look at matches now and go, man, I give that 4.25, but that really is a 5-star match now?
No. I mean, I think that if anything, I think it's actually harder, but there's more of them because.
Just let me stop for a second. I think it's harder. You're the one rating them. It's either harder or it's not harder. It's not like, I think it's harder because the council has to let me know what they think. You are the council.
But besides that, it's demonstrably obvious that there are fewer really great matches now than there were 20, 30 years ago because of not only all of the great talent that was in the business at that point in time that's gone, and has been replaced by guys that in most cases haven't had the opportunity to get the experience or the training, as well as the indie mindset taking over the amateur class and nobody being in charge. So there's dives everywhere and there's all this bullshit and the hokey furniture stuff. There are fewer matches that you can really sit down today as a wrestling fan and say, wow, that was great. That was 2 fucking pros tearing the house down, exhibiting their skill. That's far and far between these days. But he's rating them higher than those matches I previously mentioned, and most of them contain his personal friends. Imagine that. That's the problem.
Let's go back to this. He's talking about what makes a 5-star match.
You have, you know, back then, you know, it was, wrestlers had a different mentality in the sense of now they know, it's like the mentality of going into a show used to be, you know, there wasn't as much drive to put on this incredible match, which has, and believe me, that has its good and its bad because like, again, when I watch
wasn't that the attitude in Crockett Promotions? I don't give a shit. I don't care who has the best match.
Yeah. And we've talked about it in the 80s WWF. That was the case because for the most part, Vince was selling the sizzle, not the steak. He didn't give a shit. They had short matches in and out. But no, not in the organized wrestling business. You never went in there and said, I don't give a shit. Well, in fucking Rabbit Ridge, Kentucky at the elementary school, you went in and said, I don't really give a shit. But not on a real fucking show. It's ridiculous. But everybody wanted to tear the house down by having a good match that the people fucking enjoyed, that got the point across, got the finish in to lead to the rematch to get the house up so you'd make more money. And you didn't need to dive off the top rope through furniture to do that because it wouldn't have made any fucking sense.
There's some 45-year-old in Rabbit Ridge who feels gypped right now.
Well, sorry, pal, but, you know, we walked and talked on those.
AEW big show, just an example. I feel like there's so many risks and it scares me, you know, and you know, like one risk is in, you know, like WWE, you might get one big risk spot in the match and it's memorable and everything like that. But when there's so many, like when I watch a Darby or Sammy Guevara or somebody like that, and it scares me, you know, like they, and that's one of the reasons why also the matches are, you know, getting these great crowd reactions because they're working for crowd reactions.
Sure.
And the crowd does react to it. And younger, hungrier guys are going to do crazier and crazier things. And we've seen that. And, you know, it's good and it's bad. You know,
was there a point in the 2000s when it was, you know, you were tougher on ratings? Because I think in the 2000s, 2000 to 2010, you only had 7 5-star matches for that entire decade.
I didn't think there were as many great the matches.
Did you just not watch TNA? I'm just so
TNA.
This guy likes his TNA.
I watched every TNA pay-per-view. I saw, there were all kinds of 4-star matches back then. And I actually, you know, if you look back on that, the different, you know, you'll see it. 5-star match is like, I mean, to me, 5-star match, even today, should be like, okay, this is probably going to win match of the year. And when I look at that, you know, back then, you know, I mean, like now, yeah, there's more because it's just like there's so much and it gets over so big in the sense of
in a sense of nobody watching.
Because guys are working for that.
Yeah,
yeah.
They're working for his star rating. Like he's answering his own things without admitting it or answering it.
Yes, and they're working for his star ratings, and that's why nobody else is watching. Because they're trying to do a bunch of fucking moves, like a bunch of the chimp cage at the zoo, instead of worrying about drawing money and making sense.
The fact that the fans are reacting to a lot of it, and not in every place, as we've seen with AEW, it doesn't stop people from doing this stuff. The guys in the ring, the guys who do all the stupid things, a lot of them are doing it for Dave's rating. And he knows that.
But even now, I mean, there's, you know, I'm going to hear a lot more about, you know, this match should be 5 stars. And it's like, to me, it's like, if I don't think that this is going to be somewhere pretty damn high in the ballot for match of the year,
yeah,
then it's not a 5-star match, especially now, or even then. I mean, granted, there were years that the 4 3/4 or 4.5 star matches won match of the year. And that would never, you know, well, that could happen now too, you know, because again.
But what about the list of people who never had 5-star matches? I'm sure you're familiar with the people.
I don't even worry about it because it's like,
but like, I mean, these are legends: Eddie Guerrero, Triple H, Randy Savage, Kurt Angle, and it's crazy. Rob Van Dam.
Let me stop it right there. What do you think about that? You never really think of it in that context. Who hasn't had a 5-star match?
Never got a dinner. Shecky Green never got a dinner. That's an old Dean Martin show routine. That's what I'm saying. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Even then, apparently, he was rating matches based on flipping and moves rather than impact and meaning.
So based on his explanation so far, he's personally recommending more of these Young Bucks matches, including ones in rooms that it didn't get as big a reaction as other matches. He's recommending those matches more than he is matches with, like he said, Randy Savage and whoever else was on that list. Because he's saying it's his personal recommendation. 5 stars is the highest. Certain people have been able to get past that. He's recommending those matches more than everything else in wrestling before it.
Yes, that's exactly what he's saying.
Including how he ranked things that he loved that way at the time. It's insane. Let's go back.
Yes, because he did. He liked him as a fan, but he wasn't personal friends with the people involved.
How many 4-star matches? It's 4 stars is what you should be looking at, not 5. 5 means like it's a completely different animal.
But then you got someone like Kenny Omega who has 10 5 or better matches.
Yeah. So,
but then if you're like, well, 4s are what matters, then
4s is what matters. You know, I mean, like, hey, Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay and Misawa, you know, those guys.
Yeah,
they're freaking incredible. I mean, They're incredible. They're incredible, and they were put in positions to have those matches where most of these guys, Kurt, as an example, I mean, if Kurt was put in a position
was
with
in New Japan,
Misawa, if that's a guy, or maybe a Kobashi or whatever. I mean, he did with Chris. And you know, like I said, I came close with but it's like, I've always thought Kurt Angle was great. He's got tons of 4-star matches.
Let me stop it for a second. I don't even know. He's trying to justify that. I mean, I got to say, Chris Van Vliet, in a very nice way, is kind of factually just asking him about these things. And Dave doesn't have any true answer, does he?
No. He has nothing. He's got nothing, Jerry. Nothing.
Oh, 5 stars is a different beast. Explain it to me. You're the one giving it the 5-star. It's your beast.
4.5-star matches, whatever. 4-star match with Matt Morgan. But it's like the reason he doesn't have a 5, it's what? Am I biased against him? I probably voted for him in the Hall of Fame years early. It's just, it's a certain match. And maybe he never had the perfect opponent. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. It's not, I don't like think and go like, oh, you know, he's Kurt Angle, he deserves one. And nobody deserves one. When people go like, why isn't this match 5 stars? I always like, man, it's like, there's never, it's like, what didn't it have? And it's like, if it's over 4, it had it.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about five has to be when this thing's over, I'm going like,
Yeah.
This if it was in the past, I would go, this would match of the year. And now it's got to be, man, this should be talked about for match of the year. And even 4 3/4 means it should be talked about. And a 5 now would be a match where I would go like, this would have won match of the year every, most years when I was a kid. Because,
but I mean, WWE's had 9 in their entire history. AEW has had 21 in 4 years.
AEW's wrestlers work much harder to in that style. CMLL
in that style. What does that mean?
In the style that he likes, which involves the floor exercise of the high school gymnast team.
In that style being the style that he personally recommends with a 5-star rating. That's what he's beating around the bush for 20 minutes to say, but let's go back.
Which is my favorite style of wrestling, by the way, or was. I mean, I like all styles. See, how many CMLL have?
I don't know. I have to pull that stat up.
I'd say it might be, I don't know. It might be 0. And I mean, and because the CMLL style that I love is not something conducive. It's absolutely conducive to.
I think it is 0. Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go. My favorite style from childhood.
Wow.
Okay? And the reason is because the CMLL style is conducive to 4-star matches, but there's something that makes a 5-star match that their style is not conducive to. And I would say the same thing about WWE's style in general, although there are exceptions. Sometimes it just the right thing and the right magic happens, and it is that. But NXT had that all the time. I would give there's many NXT matches because NXT.
I think there's 9.
There's no, that's the same company, but it's the style that they're working for. The WWE, the NXT style was a lot more based on like what we talked about, trying new things.
Taking risks.
Taking not necessarily injury risks, but trying new things or just going and giving guys more time in main events or giving.
So we're getting some of the qualifiers here. Risk, time. These are things that go into making a 5-star match.
And generally, those things make a match worse because the longer it goes needlessly, the more chances they miss to go home and get the fuck out of there while they're ahead. And at the same time, when they take a risk trying to do shit they don't know how to do, they all fall in a fucking heap and it looks like a bunch of fucking amateur drunks.
He looks for risk and time. That's why the Young Bucks work 20-minute matches where they do flips nonstop. Because that's what Dave likes.
Yeah.
We're matching guys up that are going to deliver a great match, which was part of that thing. Whereas with WWE, that's, you're doing feuds and you're doing, it's just a different thing. It's not really conducive.
To the style of wrestling I like. To the style of wrestling I like and want to rank high.
It's like, it's not as conducive to a 5-star match.
It's really not conducive to the style of match that you like.
Bingo!
It's, no,
I mean, New Japan has 82 5-star or better.
I mean, I know, and
TNA has 1. WWE has 9. Like, it just seems like there's a certain style of match that you prefer, and that's
the way that they build in climax. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
he loves the way
my
they
favorite
climax.
match of all time is.
He loves the way they climax, and it's not conducive.
And I'll tell you what. Here's an easy way to get an extra half a star: tickle the taint.
Well, I think we're going to finish up with this next segment here, which is Dave talking about why The Rock versus Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania in Toronto didn't get 5 stars. At least I think that's what this is. Let's go to this.
Rock versus Hogan, WrestleMania 18.
But that's a different style match. That was all heat. It was great for what it was.
That crowd reaction is unmatched.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Yeah.
But it was a 3-star match, Dave.
Well, I mean, that was,
Can we right now make that maybe a 4-star match?
Look, it's we're
Could
talking
we go
about
back
matches.
and change
We're
it?
matches from decades ago. I think that probably, maybe we should. But I don't look back. I'm looking at the future.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's probably
That right there, I think, is the most telling statement. We'll go back to the last bit of audio. I'm looking to the future. He hitched to what he thought the future was, and he tried to anoint it. And anyone that stood in the way is a problem.
And unfortunately, he's now seeing that the greater population at large doesn't like his little friend's play acting. And he can't fucking come to grips with that.
Which, of course, means one thing: CM Punk is the enemy. But let's go back to this.
I was probably wrong on that one in some ways. I mean, he was, of course, but it's all about memories. It's like that match. If two other guys did that same match, move for move, right? It'd have been nothing special. But that's part of it, and maybe that's what I was going like. Okay, if any two other guys, should it have been four? Probably, sure, why not?
If you watch,
it's like whatever. It's like when I watched it, the day I watched it, it was very predictable to me, and maybe that was the problem. That I knew everything they were going to do when they did it, and which isn't necessarily bad either, because that is always whatever. I don't know.
If you watch a match live.
Let me stop it there. Again, it goes on. I encourage people to check out the full interview. It is a really good conversation. Chris Van Vliet with Dave Meltzer is on it's on Chris Van Vliet's YouTube channel. But Jim, you started this star rating business. What are your thoughts on the most famed star rater and his thoughts on the star ratings?
I still don't know really what his thoughts are, cutting through the various effluvia slide of words, except that he's pretty much admitted that he rates the shit that he likes high, which is kind of what the idea of rating shit to begin with is. But that's why the people shouldn't take it fucking seriously. It's a guide. If a movie that you might want to watch gets a 1/2 star, maybe you'll think again about wasting your time. But if you want to see it and it's 2, 3, 4, whatever, you're going to watch it. It doesn't mean that much. Not only these marks, but these fucking mark wrestlers are living and dying on, we got to do enough moves so Dave will give us 5 stars when they're in promotions that aren't drawing 5 fucking people. And again, as you just mentioned, he thought, Harpo and the Buckaroos and their ilk are going to be the wave of the future, and all the young people are going to like them. So I'll have more subscribers until I die, because all of my old friends think I've gone absolutely batshit fucking nuts for praising these dipshits.
Because I'm afraid I won't keep up with the times. Someone said something to me.
And I won't learn.
Yeah, learn. Okay. He said something to someone who's a mutual friend of ours many years ago, because I remember hearing about it probably like 2003, 2004, somewhere in that range. And the person said they told Dave that they didn't like The Observer as much anymore. It was too much MMA coverage. Again, this is in the early 2000s. And Dave, I forget the exact quote. I may have it somewhere. It was basically, it's an insurance policy in case anything happens with WWE.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing else. There won't be anything else to write about. If anything happens to WWE, there goes the industry. And a part of me wonders if it was the same thought process behind hitching his wagon to the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega. I'm not saying, because look, you and me have disagreed about Omega's matches. It's one thing saying the guy's a really good wrestler. It's another thing saying his matches are the greatest of anyone ever. Or that his matches today could be put in any time in history and it would be the match of the year. That's your personal...
If you showed a Greensboro Coliseum sellout, a Kenny Omega match in 1986, they would have rioted and set the seats on fire.
People would have been pointing to each other with finger bangs leaving the arena. Oh, who's that guy? Boo, boo, boo.
Did you see the fake match with the guy doing the fucking flips and pointing at everything?
But I think that's a lot of it. It's Dave's personal preference, and also it's Dave's self-preservation. And I think a lot of that is kind of apparent in what he said and what he couldn't find the words to say in this interview.
But here's the thing. We've easily found an audience. And it's bigger than the one he's got. And it's bigger than the one that the modern fucking wrestling promotions have. It's all the wrestling fans who think this shit sucks. And they're offended by it. And the same reason that you are not as offended by Kenny as I am, because you were, even though you were a wrestling fan, you were not someone who depended on the wrestling business for your income and took that
That's right.
deep level of pride in it. So yeah, the fucking guy's a jack off. He wrestles sex toys and fucking children and does inappropriate things with his fingers up other guys' asses. But you're not as offended as deeply as I am. You can say, okay, he's a pretty good wrestler.
No, I don't like that stuff, but I can.
Well,
enjoy
I'm
his
saying
matches.
you're not as offended as deeply as I am.
As someone from the business, absolutely not.
As someone from the business. And that's why I'm offended by anyone from the business that's not offended by this fucking asswipe. And because they should be. And they're disappointing to me that they're not. But that's the thing when you're talking about the size of an audience. The audience of people that used to watch wrestling is 5 times the size that it is now. And the audience of people that think that all these fucking little soft, pansy-ass pussies and their grab-ass gymnastics are not worth watching is bigger than the audience that watches it. So why is Dave so fucking worried that everybody's not going to read his newsletter anymore?
Because of access. If Dave wrote the realities of any of Chris Jericho's worst stuff over the last several years, even if you're a Chris Jericho fan, if you're going to tell me that his biggest fan doesn't think some of his stuff was really bad in the last 4 years or so of AEW, you'd be lying to me. I think there was a lot of bad stuff, and I'm not a big fan of modern day Chris Jericho. So Dave hasn't written anything negative about Chris Jericho. Do you think Chris Jericho will still be chummy with Dave and Alvarez and the Observer site if they started saying, Chris looked really bad here, or the crowd really didn't react to this match, or the music's over, and the music's over?
He always said bad things about somebody.
Yeah, you can critique a bad match, but you can't do it if you're afraid you're going to lose access. It goes back to this Matt Hardy
Well,
thing.
that's what
It's
I'm
a
saying.
cycle of self-preservation.
He always said bad things about somebody, so is it that he's just gotten more worried about pissing off the wrong person, or is it just that everybody's gotten so fucking soft that they can't take it?
Both. It's both of those things. Now, like I said, it goes back to the Matt Hardy thing. It's a cycle of self-preservation. Latching yourself to the young thing that you think is going to happen, or that has happened, or that's happening in the moment, whatever it is, it's an act of self-preservation. Being able to say what you really feel about these things, it's a hard thing to do, but it's something we can do here on this show. And we will continue to do it in the future.
Is Uncle Dave finished? Because I've actually got to start getting ready to go and be really wildly relevant and make a lot of fucking money this evening.
Let's not talk about any of that yet, because But let's get...
I wasn't going to reveal it, but it's going to happen.